Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to My Spiritual Money RX. This is your host, Vivian S. de Guzman, the #1 money magnet activator. Today, in this special show, we would allow you to really meet the TWI team, see who's behind the scenes in really making business work, right? So we know that in business, there is such an element as money. Now, however, a lot of people that are transitioning, let's say, from a corporate job, or they were an employee and they want to be a business owner, there's still this lack of clarity, right? And there's still a lot of questions in their mind. So what I have done here is actually bring in our whole team in order for you to ask them questions and find out how they transitioned, right? What are the steps? What are the fears behind changing? Because it's kind of like changing from one house to another house, like moving from city to city or state to state. The change gives us some form of some negative emotions at times, and then we don't know what to do, right? So I would love to welcome the TWI team today in helping you understand their journey and also all of the steps, these 5 steps to transition to entrepreneurship. So let us welcome Jade Stone. Jade, hello, girl. How are you
Hello.
today?
I'm great. Great to be here.
Right. So, Jade, share with them a little bit of what's your role in our team.
Yes. When Vivian and I started working together, one of the big goals that we were working on was to structure the business in a growth place, right? So being and coming from a place where you're growing into a team. So it's not just you, right? In the beginning, you operate as a CEO, as an owner, right? And those are things that you do, and you do all the jobs. You do every single part of that, right? So when companies grow and structure themselves, that's one way that I come in to help build those foundations. So how do we go from just me to a company and a group, all together? So those are some of the things that I do as we continue to bring in new clients and we continue to grow. Different things have to be created as far as strategy, and that's what I'm working on.
Awesome. Thank you, Jade. All right. Now let's welcome Dave Baldwin. All right. So let's move that about. Hey, Dave. Dave is our finance officer. And basically, for those of you that get triggers about money, he can help you with that, right? So, Dave, go ahead and introduce yourself to the audience. What is your role, role in our TWI?
Yes, thank you for having me, Vivian. Yeah, so my role is managing the money, and part of what I like to work with people on, I always focus on it. It always comes back to the money and the numbers, and really getting clarity about the numbers. My philosophy is that if you're unclear what to do next in a business, the first thing you have to do is really take a closer look at what the numbers are, because numbers bring you back to objective reality about where you are in the business and what needs to go to move forward. So that's my role is with TWI and anyone else that I work with, is to put the tools and the processes in place to create that clarity about the numbers and the money.
Right. Thank you so much, Dave, for being here. I'm sure the audience would have lots of questions for each one of you. So now let's call our customer happiness manager, and that is Andrea Kutchin.
Hello, nice to
Right.
see you.
Hi, Andrea. Welcome.
Hi. Thank
All right.
you.
So
Thanks for
describe to
inviting
them
me.
a little bit of our journey together. Like, I know we've
Yes.
met each other for a long time. And
Mm.
then I called you back and I said, I think I need your help because I couldn't manage everything by myself. So go ahead and share with them your role with TWI.
I have two different hats actually within TWI. I am the customer happiness manager. So I make sure that everyone's happy and feeling well looked after, which is extremely important. But also from the student perspective, I help with accountability, which is a very important thing, because once you've worked on your strategy with Jade and then you've worked on your numbers with Dave, you need to have something in place that helps you make sure that you get everything done on a regular basis. Because trust me, having the intention of doing something and actually doing it are two totally different things. So I'm there to help you actually do the things that you intend to do when you're working with Vivian.
Yes, thank you so much. Yeah, so I love this team, right? So we have a few missing teammates, which we will feature in another show. Amy Lancy, our copywriter, and of course, we have a few VAs that's working with us, supporting us with all the projects that's happening. All right, so let's see. Let's move me back there. Thank you for your patience, everyone. So I'm going to ask the team members some questions so that you can relate, right? Because we are, let's say I used to be an employee, right? And I was kind of scared. I was a physical therapist. I was in the healthcare system, but I saw what was happening way back when, back in 2008, and I decided that I needed to start a business. So what are some of the reasons why it's good to be an entrepreneur? I can tell you, you can do trial and error. It's a very costly mistake, actually, when you start doing that, because time will not be on your side, and whatever investment or money that you have initially sometimes just goes out the drain very, very quickly if there's no plan, if there's no path, no strategy, no specific actions in place, right? So Jade, would you like to comment on what are, well, all of them. I want to ask this question. What are some of the reasons why it's good to be an entrepreneur? So let's say these people are thinking about it, right? Are there some reasons why you even went into entrepreneurship yourself?
Yes. I think I would say freedom is probably one of the largest ones, right? It's one of the largest ones I think that people feel when they're pulled towards being an entrepreneur, right? So there surely is freedom in you can make your own schedule, right? You can do your own things. There isn't someone telling you when and where to do things. Now, there's an other side to that, right? Which is why there's teams like us to help, because without that structure, it can be scary, right? A lot of people want freedom, but misinterpret what it will feel like to not have any structure at all. Right. And so that's really where, we see people come into our programs saying, I know where I want to go. I have the vision. I feel very strongly about it. Right. And I even know some of the things that I should do, but I'm struggling and I'm not sure why. Usually the biggest area there, right, is we want freedom and structure maybe scares us, or we don't know how to do it just on our own. And so making investments in yourself and your business to have a team to help you say, all I really need to put in is the structure, right? That changes that transition from I work for someone else to I'm an entrepreneur. So that's just one thing. I think everyone kind of goes to, well, freedom, of course. I want to be my own boss. And that means all of these things. It surely does. But it also means that you're the one creating the structure at the same time. And no matter how high you are in a corporation, someone else is giving you some kind of structure. Even if you're the CEO of a corporation, there could be board members, right? There's other people giving a structure. It's not just you. And we'll talk a little bit later about things we wish we would have known and things like that. And that definitely is my story, right? I underestimated how much structure I'm going to have to put in place myself, and waited too long to probably get support, mainly because support looks different, right? Than in a company, you maybe go to your boss. It's very easy. I need help. I'm going to go to my boss. Well, there's no boss. It's just you, right? So you guys have found this show and Vivian to be able to have this type of access is super important, and you're here for a reason. So,
Right. Awesome. Thank you. All right. So let's hear from Dave this time. Hey, Dave. So what are some reasons why it's good to be an entrepreneur? Like, share with us your story on how you ended up being an entrepreneur.
Yeah, I mean, I really think it comes down to the key word of freedom. Just like a lot of us have heard, I think freedom is not simply just about making more money or being able to to take an afternoon off if you want necessarily. I mean, there's some of those perks, but I think there's a kind of one of the misconceptions about entrepreneurship in my experience, or I'll actually answer your question first, but I want to get back to this one point about freedom because I think it's a really important piece to this. I mean, essentially, I became an entrepreneur because I just decided that I wanted to have greater autonomy and sovereignty in deciding how I wanted my life to be set up. I did not want to have to, as far as what kind of clients I want to work with, what type of work that I'm going to want to do. I can't just decide those things arbitrarily. I have to negotiate that, and the clients have to agree to it. But I wanted to be able to make those decisions without having to go back to a boss and say, okay, is this all okay? Well, that became unsatisfactory after a point. And but at the same point, I think the freedom that it comes with requires a whole different set of skills that are unfamiliar. And if you don't realize those skills, it can really catch you by surprise, and you can go kind of into some darker type of territory, which thankfully I'm more familiar with, having gone down this path a couple of times myself. But one of the things is that if you're used to having the structure of a job, psychologically it becomes a habit. It becomes easy to just get into your routine. You have to be at the office or at a job site at 7:30 every morning. You take lunch at a certain time, you go home at a certain time at night. It becomes a comfortable routine. It becomes automatic. It really doesn't require as much discipline to keep up the things that you have to do. You become self-employed, all of a sudden that goes away. And there is more freedom, but in other words, there's less freedom because of the fact that you have to manage a lot of these different things that someone doesn't provide that structure. So I think it's definitely worth the trade-off personally, but you also have to be ready to go there and have to recognize what are those elements of readiness. You have to be financially ready, psychologically ready, and you have to have a certain set of skills established. And I think it's, the first time I tried to make that jump into entrepreneurship, it went very badly because I was not ready. And I think if I had it all to do over again, I still would have ultimately made the same decision, but I would have done a few things in a very different sequence than I did the first time. So I think that's one of the things that's really important to understand about making that transition.
Yes, thank you for that. See, like everybody has a different way of looking at things, right? And that is so true. So in this team, because we have our individual expertise and then we put it together, right? Like in a big container. And we went through that ourselves. So the more we can go step by step with, based on, actually, I work on your human design and we have other people in our team that actually help you with your emotions and with your astrology, right? So the more you know the different elements of life and what would you use when, it's not like you have to use everything at one time, right? Like Dave said, it's a sequence. It's like, what is the first step? What is the second step? What is the third step? So when you can do those things successfully, then of course you feel good about yourself, right? And the business that you are establishing. All right. Thank you, Dave. Now we'll bring Andrea Kuchin, our customer happiness manager and our accountability coach. So, hey, Andrea. So share with the group here. I think you're still muted. What are some of the reasons why it's good to be an entrepreneur? Like, why did you choose to be an entrepreneur? Because I know you've been doing this for a while.
Yes. And initially, I did not choose it at all. No. I used to be an employee, and I was very happy as an employee because I like structure, but I also like to have time away from work. So I used to enjoy going to an office in the morning and coming home in the evenings and having my afternoons to myself, or my evenings and my weekends to myself. But
Mhm.
I was made redundant, and I got another job and I was made redundant again. And then I went into a field which is typically very much freelance based, and I became a freelancer. So sometimes
Right.
I was working, sometimes I wasn't. Sometimes I had long contracts, sometimes I had short ones. It wasn't because I particularly chose to do it that way. I didn't choose it until later when I moved to the United States and I had a daughter. At that point, I chose to be at home because I wanted to be with her and I wanted freedom of time and freedom of
Mm.
money. Now,
Mhm.
Dave has already talked about how freedom of time actually trips you up because you have to create a lack of freedom in a way, the same way that you had when you were an employee, so that you have the structure that Jade talked about.
Mhm.
Financial freedom doesn't come immediately either. That's something that takes work. But something
Mhm.
that I've learned to do over the years is to work with leverage. So creating systems that are more automated and less
Mhm.
hands-on. And that's
Right.
something that the others didn't mention. But the freedom
Mhm.
to be able to be at home with my daughter, to be there when she needed me, to work round her schedule. And now, obviously, she doesn't need me anymore. She's in high school, but I can travel as much as I like. We just spent 7 weeks in the UK for the summer.
Nice.
I can take my
Nice.
work with me.
Yes.
That's the
Yeah, and you
most important
communicated
thing.
with us even when you were in UK during our staff meetings.
Yeah, I
So,
was at your staff meetings. It was tea time
yes.
for me, breakfast for you, but so what? I
Yes.
was still
Yes.
there.
Right, right. So
Mhm,
that's the freedom that
mhm,
we're all. So for us, I'm sure we have different definitions of freedom, right? So for some of
mm,
us could be time with family. Some of us could be, I just want to go to the beach. That's me. I have to have time for my meditation and my quiet time. Now, some of us, it could be having to spend time with family, like I said, or even for yourself, like having that time alone, right? All right. So now, thank you, Andrea, for sharing that. And thank you for hanging out with us here at TWI. So the next question is, was there a life-changing lesson for you when you transitioned to entrepreneurship? So I'm going to share mine first. I I I almost felt like I always go into these weird emergencies when I was in physical therapy. In fact, I had like a TIA, which is a warning sign for a stroke. So in the spiritual plane or spiritual realm, stroke means, or a warning sign of a stroke means I was trying to figure out whether I was going to stay here or not. And I said, well, what is my purpose in life, right? So obviously, if you don't know your purpose or you feel like your life doesn't have a purpose, same thing, your business will have a purpose because once you give it that soul, so to speak, then it starts to grow kind of like a child. So for me, it took that emergency, right? In order for me to realize that I couldn't be a physical therapist forever because I did not want the rinse and repeat cycle. And obviously, when I became an entrepreneur, I realized that there are parts of the business that need to be automated and have to be a system in order for it to actually grow and expand. Because, like when you're a baby, right? There's no, well, depending on your parents, right? Sometimes there's no schedule of your sleep until your parents share with you, like, okay, you go sleep when it's dark and you wake up when it's light, right? So we're learning as we go. So think of yourself, are you a baby in the business? Maybe you're a toddler, maybe you're a teenager, or maybe you're a full-grown adult. But even adults, I notice in the energy world, right? They're adults, but then some parts of them are like a kid. It's almost like there has to be an integration of this person when they own a business because it's like taking care of another child and looking at this child grow up. So that's what I realized when I decided to expand the business and decided to I said, I want to help more people, and then I want to reach this certain revenue, right? So when you go 6, 7, 8 figures, totally different scenario per income level, literally. So that emergency for me was my wake-up call, and I knew I could not be an employee. Even if I thought I was going to retire as a physical therapist, I said, well, I can apply that knowledge and skill level actually into a business. Hence, here comes the new business, right? That we're growing. It's like there's always another form of it as it evolves every single year, because it's like a kid that's growing up. So that was mine. That was my life-changing lesson. I can't do it by myself. In order for me to grow, in order for me to grow my income, in order for me to help more people, I cannot do things alone. So that was my biggest life-changing lesson. All right, so let's ask Jade, what was her life-changing lesson?
Yes. So I think mine was actually after I decided to make the decision to move from corporate into owning my own business. And it was a little bit about, what I mentioned in the structure, right? Understanding this is the exact same job I was doing before, except I'm now doing it for myself. I'm making the money for myself, not for a bunch of other people. So, wow, why does it feel so different? Right. And, one of those reasons that it felt so different was because of that structure that wasn't in place when it was just myself. So the learning, at that point, I like data, I like numbers. So, figuring out, okay, this is my cost to run the business. And I get to keep more of it if it's just me, right? And when we first launch a business, that's kind of with the place we're in, right? When we don't have a ton of capital and we're trying to save and we're trying to do those things, hiring other people at that point seems scary, and it seems like that's not possible, right? But unfortunately, without some of those hires, right, you will always stay in the same position. You will always stay very small.
Yes.
It will be hard to expand. It will be hard to grow, right? Grow into those kinds of things. And so that's just one thing that I didn't think about really until it happened. And now, a lot of my clients, a lot of the people that come through Vivian's programs all say the same thing, right? Well, of course I want to have a team, but I need to make X amount. Or I don't even know the amount. A lot of times we don't even know the amount. We just say, I don't have enough now.
Yeah.
Well,
Yes.
that's not even a plan, right? Like, I'm not okay with that, because that means we don't even have a plan. So working with someone like Dave to say, okay, how much is it going to cost me? Right? Okay, then strategic wise, how much do I have to charge to whom to get that money and that budget? So even if that's okay, I know exactly what I'm doing and I'll be able to hire a team in 3 months or 6 months. That's better than, well, I'm just too new. I can't have a team yet. I just launched. It should be me. It should be a struggle. And that's not the case, right? So that is kind of my biggest thing that I learned along the way that I really, really try to speak about when we have, people who are transitioning from a corporate setting to their own setting, is to give them examples, right? And try to really show using numbers, this is how long it could take, right? If we don't make this investment, but if we do, right, this is the time that it could take off of you, right?
Yes.
And that usually ends up making really big strides really quickly.
Thank you. Thank you. So now let's bring in Dave. So Dave, what are some of your life-changing lessons when you transition to entrepreneurship?
Well, one of the things, as counterintuitive as this may sound, but getting in the habit of forecasting my cash flow was definitely a life-changing lesson. And specifically, when I say forecasting cash flow, I mean looking at how many dollars are currently sitting in my bank account and how much is going to be in my bank account 3 to 6 months from now, based on my income streams and expenses. It takes more work and more effort to get to the point where you can accurately know what that number is than a lot of times people may think. And I actually am an advocate for doing that for the business and doing it personally, because one of the things that really I see as an essential component of learning how to think like a business owner is separating money as completely as possible. And one of the first things I would say is anybody who wants to start a business is go open a business bank account. You can get one for free at most banks. And even if you just put $100 in it, even if there's no money coming in immediately, if you establish that habit of treating your money as a separate entity that's going through the business, that really helps to instill that mindset. And at this point, one of the other things that I started doing this year is I pay myself as an employee, and I have a payroll company that pays the taxes to the federal government and everything, just as if you would get paid if you're an employee for somebody else. And so one of the things that does for me is I actually think of it as I wear different hats. I've talked about this on different shows before, where I have my business owner hat, I have my manager hat, and then I have my employee hat. And so that when it's time to start work, I say, okay, Dave, the employee, it's time to clock in and start working. And then I have Dave, the manager, who sits down and says, okay, I'm going to plan on what I'm going to have Dave, the employee, work on tomorrow when he comes and shows up. So when you think about the mechanics of this, it's really not that much different than what you would do working for somebody else. You just have to realize that you are wearing all of the hats instead of having a team. But I think kind of going to Jade's point, if you want to get yourself in the position to have a team, you need to get your stuff organized into buckets and be ready and think within those different places, because sooner or later, someone else is going to be able to fill that employee spot. And if you don't have a system in place to manage those tasks for yourself, you're not going to be able to do it with somebody else. And it's the unfortunate thing I see with a lot of business owners is when they finally just get desperate and needing to hire somebody, then they just kind of do it by the seat of the pants. And it's like, okay, now I'm just drowning, so I'll bring somebody in and start delegating on the fly. And I think it's in a much better position if you start thinking about it from a delegation standpoint early in the life cycle of your business as soon as possible. So that having to make that paradigm shift, Vivian, to answer your question, that was really life-changing for me on a number of fronts.
Yes, definitely. So yes, number one, from what I'm hearing from these two so far, you cannot run a business alone, right? That's the common thread. And then as soon as you know what to do, what to delegate, right? And the one thing I'm going to share is one of the 5 steps to transition is you have to know your genius zone and what to delegate. This particular plan, right? Well, sounds like a good sentence, but some people don't even know their genius zone. That's why we have human design to help them with that, right? Because once you know what lane you need to drive on, right? Because my brother, he works for like a finance organization, and he said there are certain people, right? You know how a donut looks like, right? It's round with a circle and it's just rinse and repeat. It's horizontal, it's flat. Well, majority of the entrepreneurs I've seen are not really donuts, rinse and repeat. Some of us are, we call like a vertical growth, right? Like we call that Taurus in Innerwise. So you can never be a Taurus, like think of a figure of 8 going up, like a vine climbing up, versus a donut that's flat and it's just rinse and repeat. You drink coffee every day, you eat lunch the same time, and whatever that same lunch, it doesn't matter if you eat the same lunch for 10 years, you're still going to be happy as a clam. Most likely you're a donut. There's nothing wrong or right about one versus the other. It's just rinse and repeat for some people are good. But for some of us entrepreneurs, especially when you're building something, usually you have an element of a Taurus, right? And when you're able to set up your team accordingly, because let's say you really don't like the rinse and repeat cycle, then don't go there. Assign somebody that loves that job. So that's what delegation is about. All right. So we're going to talk about more of the 5 steps in a minute here. So let's bring in Andrea. Andrea, what was your life-changing lesson when you transitioned to entrepreneurship?
The fact that I had to do absolutely everything. And in the companies that I'd worked in before, I only had to do the thing that I was good at. Now, suddenly I have to do everything. And that is a completely different thing, because whereas before I was pretty much only doing what I loved, now I was doing what I loved, what I didn't like at all, and what I absolutely hated and was rubbish at. And that was very difficult. Mm.
Oh my God.
So
That was,
the whole process of delegating for me also was really difficult because I can't think of the word now. I'm a perfectionist. And there were certain things that I was absolutely certain nobody would ever be able to do as well as me. So how could I possibly give these things to somebody else? Even if
yes.
I didn't like doing them very much and I wanted to give them to somebody else, there was some kind of weird emotional thing going on of, they'll never do it as well as me and things will start going wrong. And I always have to correct everything anyway. And then guess what happened? I
Mm,
created that environment with the first few people that I hired. They actually weren't
mhm.
doing things as well as I was, and things were going wrong, which I'd kind of predicted and created myself, which is
Right.
really stupid. So there was a
Sounds like a
mind,
mindset thing, right? Right. Your
there was,
mind was almost channeling that information to
yeah,
them.
yeah. So I
I
had
made
to
the
do a
same
lot of,
mistake.
yeah, I had to do a lot of inner work and
Yep.
start letting go and trusting that
Hmm.
other people could do things too. And
Hmm.
eventually, and it was a painful process, I must say, but boy, was it worth it afterwards.
Yes.
I'm now able to let go and give things to other people. And even if they don't work out perfectly exactly the way I would have done in my perfectionistic, obsessive way, they're so often better or more interesting, or they
Mhm.
give other ideas that go somewhere else. There's much
Yes.
more ease and flow in my life now because
Hmm.
I've been able to let go of things. But that was a process that I had to go through. And of course, since then, because I understand it, I've been able to help other people go through it as well.
Yes. Amazing. Thank you
Mm.
so much for that. Okay. So now I'm going to bring everybody up like so, and we're going to discuss this whole thing about the 5 steps to transition, right? So the number one thing is we do need to know our genius zone and what to delegate. So in my human design, funny because I really didn't think this was my genius zone. 80% of what I need to be doing for my design Mars was marketing. But it's interesting because I have 2 TV shows. I go to podcasts for interviews, and I'm like, oh, yeah, I guess I do that anyway. And when I say something, people believe it. Like, oh, looks like you had a good result about that. So I want that number too, right? So marketing is actually my genius zone. So Jade, share with them your genius zone. Oh, unmute.
Yeah. So selling is one of my main genius zone places. So being able to speak to people and really hear them and what they need, and then sell them, if it's something that aligns, right? So I think, having a genius zone of selling can be used in a lot of different ways. But for me, really identifying who needs what, and is this really a match, and why, right? Like, why is this a match, particularly for this person? That's really what I'm looking for and where my genius zone is.
Okay, thank you. And I want to clarify for some of you that still have triggers with money, sales or selling is equivalent to helping others actually to also get what they want in life, right? So once I have really, I have redefined the definition of selling. So now I don't have this icky salesman feeling because, like you said, if they don't need it, right? If it's not going to benefit them, I don't need to offer it to them at all, right? But if I'm sensing that they truly are looking for help and they need something, so in your mind, sometimes you think you just need one thing, but sometimes you need more than that because some problems only take a few hours or minutes to solve. Because once you shift that mindset, right, it just takes you to that right path. All right, Dave, what is your genius zone? And share with the audience what that
So
is for you.
my genius zone is system and process design, and when I say that, I specifically mean pulling apart a process that may seem like a matter of natural talent or inborn talent to somebody, because a lot of times people, particularly people that are really good at something, don't know how to describe what it is they're doing because it becomes second nature. And they're like, well, I don't really know how to say what I do. I just do it and it just happens. Yep. And usually when I look at what somebody does, there are a lot of very simple steps that can be pulled out. Maybe it's not going to just be one or two necessarily, but I can sit back and it requires some observation, it requires kind of digging in. And sometimes the way I'll do that is I might say, okay, pretend like you're hiring me to come work as your assistant and teach me how to do it step by step. And a lot of times people don't know how to say what they're doing, but when I make the right observations and ask the right questions, I can start to not only pull apart what it is they're currently doing, but sometimes actually find a better way to set up the process so that, for instance, if somebody who's a highly skilled person and they're spending maybe 40% of their time doing tasks that don't really require that much skill, but because everything is so meshed together, they can't see any way to separate it in a way that makes any sense. So I can pull that apart and say, okay, now I can set this up where somebody else can do that 40% of the work. And you can now concentrate all of your time doing. So it's almost like I have my zone of genius is your zone of genius. In that way, it is helping to discover what your zone of genius is and set up a process that allows you to stay focused there. But in terms of finances, that's one of the things that I can come in and kind of help figure out. Like right now, as a project I'm working on this week is figuring out how money is being utilized. And part of what you have to do is sit there and track time at the task level and figure out how are people spending their time. And I could certainly go into that at great length, but it all comes back to really pulling apart those processes.
Right. Okay. Thank you. How about you, Andrea? What is your genius zone?
My genius zone is being able to understand other people so that I can help them realize what it is they're trying to achieve. So I can help them organize themselves. I'm a sort of natural networker. I'm always trying to find things that fit into the spaces. But in terms of how we work with your clients, it's organizing people and helping them understand what it is that they want to do and get it done, more importantly, because it's about where they put their energies and how they manage their time and their energy. And I can kind of sometimes sort of intuitively understand, even if they can't express it well, and then support them in doing the right activity so that they get to where they want to be.
Awesome. All right. Now, the second one that's really good when you're transitioning to entrepreneurship is to build a strategic network. Like I said, before I even decided to build a business, Andrea and I met at CEO Space years ago. And you know how you like to work with people whom you like, right? And then you've already developed a relationship. And then you just kind of talk casually, and then you realize their strengths as you talk with them. And then another person, like Dave was referred to me by Amy Lancy, my copywriter. So you see how we know people. So it's the network, the quality of your network is really what allows you to build a very strong foundation in business. Number 3, you've heard this of many, many times, right? Create a clear vision of the future. So the 3 of you, can you share what does a vision do for people? Because for me, when the vision is like, when there's no vision, it's kind of like, I have to do this every day. I am so bored. I quit. Like, that's me. But the vision is like my lighthouse. I'm like, oh, that thing is nice. I'm going to go there. One day I'm going to go there, right? So what is a clear vision for you, and how can they have a clear vision? Jade, go ahead and share.
Yeah, I think it's important, the vision becomes really important. Like you said, there's a lot of things in the beginning of opening a business, for sure, as you're growing yourself internally, as you're growing your business, that aren't fun and great. It's not where ultimately you want to be, right? And if you don't think about your vision, then you're thinking about, like you said, I'm waking up and I'm doing this and I don't like it every day. Instead of, okay, I work with people and say, what are the top 3 things you hate to do? Great. Let's have a plan for when we can cycle those things out. It's different, right? If okay, I only have to do this for 2 more weeks, 3 more months, right?
Yes.
That's different than every day. Oh, I hate this. Maybe I made a mistake. Maybe I should go back to my job. Should I, get another job? This is too hard, right? So the vision, I think, helps keep some of those mindset things at bay and say, no, you know what? I know where I'm going and I can see the clear picture of how to get there. So when we're doing vision work, I'm doing it in like a 3-mile stint. Right. So if, 3 miles is the end of the race, let's break it up into mile 2, mile 1. Right. So even if it's generalized, you actually feel like you can have this thing and hold it. And that's, I think, what's, really important in a vision.
It actually goes to step 4, which is put a strategic plan with steps and timelines. That's what Jade's talking about, right? Because if you think you're going to get there in 3 months, but then you really don't know, like, how does it look like in a month? It's kind of like you're baking a cake, but you don't know how to bake the cake. You don't know step 1, 2,
Exactly.
3. So that would be disastrous. It might not look like a cake. Okay. All right, Dave. So let's go back to step 3, create a clear vision of the future. So how did you create yours, Dave?
Well, there's a lot that for me that kind of goes into a vision, but I've always had a vision from the beginning of creating the future of a community. And I've noticed that there's been a lot of our innovation over the last 200 years when you go back to, even much further back than that, but in particular since the industrial age and the computer age, the information age, and then social media and smartphones. What's begun to happen is there's a shift away from innovating better gadgets and stuff that does things. We're now moving into a domain of where I see we're going to be innovating in the realm of mental health, relationships, and better communities. Because the thing is, what I'm observing is that if you don't know how to create trust and loyalty within a community, it doesn't matter how great your gadgets are. You're just going to have people with shiny gadgets that don't trust each other. And so to me, I'm looking at that's where the future of innovation is headed. And I've had this vision of, and what would it be like to have a neighborhood where nobody really ever has to worry about their finances or the ability to find a job, because there's truly a sense and a spirit and a shared commitment of making sure everyone's taken care of, and but without trying to basically try to force a mandate in place, but because that's what everyone naturally wants. So that's kind of, that vision has gradually taken shape over time, but that's really what I wake up every day and think about, as far as the reason why I'm doing all the things that I'm doing.
Yes, because when you have that big why, right, then it does matter what you do or don't do, because you want to move forward towards that vision rather than away from it. Thank you. Andrea, share with us your vision when you started.
It was mostly to do with finance and time. So it was mostly to do with how much money I wanted to make and how much time I didn't want to be working so that I was available to be with my daughter. It morphed over time. And I think some people don't realize this as well. You might start with a really, really clear vision of a certain thing. It doesn't mean to say that that is going to be the focus of your attention forever. And it's okay that it develops over time as well. So it became more of what I wanted to achieve with what I was doing, the effect I wanted to have on people. It became more about that. I suppose because when I started, I couldn't quite imagine what the effect might be. Also because I was new doing something and I didn't know how well I'd be able to do it. And I deeply, deeply underestimated my own value. So I, at the beginning, wasn't aware of what the vision could become. But at least I had something so that I had a target to get towards. And then I broke down, as Jade said earlier on, I broke down the steps to get to the target. And then when I realized I could do those things, and I could create those effects on people, then my vision sort of morphed more to do with what the effects were that I create. And now I can focus on that, and the other stuff kind of takes care of itself.
Yeah, so you have a foundation, and that's what you were talking about, Jade and you, about a strategic plan with steps and timelines. If there's no timeline, it's just a dream.
It usually
if you think of a
happen.
goal, right? A goal is a dream with a deadline. Because some people I notice have some triggers when it comes to words. Like the word money for people is a trigger. It's very interesting. But when you talk about wealth, they don't have that trigger. It's not the same, right? But then in their mind, they could associate the wealth with the rich, which is also, it could be another trigger, another rabbit hole, right? So we're here to help you as a team to put a strategic plan with steps and timelines. And obviously, as I read the energy, and some of the healers in our team actually help you cope with some of those emotions, some of those mindset that you have, because they will come up, right? Entrepreneurship is so interesting because the things that you've been hiding actually come out of the closet. So it is super important that we establish a routine of healthy habits. So for me, my habit is I have to clear my head every morning. I go out in nature because for me, that's unlimited. It's expansive, right? The sky, the clouds, the trees. So I go walk outside in nature. That's part of my healthy habit. Now, if you're working and you got to be at work at a certain time, a lot of times you can't even go do that, right? So being an entrepreneur helped me establish the habits I want to do in the beginning and at the end of the day and even in the middle of the day. So Jade, share with them some of your healthy habits that you developed over the years being an entrepreneur.
So I think one thing, when you're looking at your genius zone, is then when are you most creative in that time or in your genius zone? A lot of times we go from corporate, right? And so we say, okay, 9 to 5 or 8 to 7 or whatever you were used to, you try to go and do. And sometimes that works. And sometimes it doesn't. So for me, I'm on the East Coast. So for me, I used to get up at 5 and 6 and prepare and be working at 7 in the morning. I have a lot of California clients, so it didn't make sense to do that anymore, right? And so to start work at 10 felt very odd for me, right? And it got in my head about, well, you're not starting early enough, so you're lazy and all of these things, right? Instead of just saying, hey, let's just back up and say what works best, right? Well, it doesn't make sense because my clients aren't even awake yet and no one wants to talk to me at 6 a.m. Pacific time, right? So I'm going to push everything back a little bit. Or, what are some things that I can do on the front end and start early and get my things done? So really like digging into that and kind of shredding what you know about your past in corporate or working for someone else and saying, what is going to work for me here? Right. I think a lot of times we try to take that and then move it over. And then we're super hard on ourselves when it doesn't work. Instead of just saying, okay, when do I feel most productive? Like if I look back at my last week, you know what? It was right before lunch. Like I'm always tired after lunch. Right. And sometimes that's because what you're eating and things like that. But sometimes it's just, for me, I'm a morning person. I wake up and can sit at my desk and zone right in. I don't need time. I don't need a couple cups of coffee. Like I'm in. So I try to capture that. Right. Where if I wait too long, then I'm not as in my genius zone, right? I'm not creative. So then taking that and saying, do I do client calls during that time? Do I create? Right? Really kind of digging into some of those things. So that's what I would say is start your routine from, even if you know 2 things about yourself, right? So even if when you start, like I knew, hey, I really feel really productive in the morning. I feel really rested and I feel ready to go. Great. I'm going to wake up and draw out dreams for my business and timelines for my business because that's when I have the most energy and that's going to be the hardest to do if I'm tired. Right? That could be one place to start. Even if you're not sure where to start, something that small is what I would recommend.
Thank you. All right. How about you, Dave?
It's really funny. What Jade was talking about right in the beginning is exactly one of the things I just started to have some insights about myself, thinking like, wow, how in what ways am I still operating like I work in an 8 to 5 office? And just
Uh-huh.
realizing I got so used to those things and so many of them just really didn't make sense anymore. But one of the things that I've definitely, it's been a critical habit for me that has really been important, is to get out of isolation and create support circles, and get in the habit of talking to people that I can draw on as kind of my sounding board. This, especially if you're used to working in an office and used to socially being around places, and then you're trying to get into a position where you're not going to have that anymore.
Uh-huh.
There's someone once told me years back, your mind is a dangerous place and don't go there alone. So I've found that having that regular sense of people that are working in similar situations that I can just talk to on a daily basis, doesn't
Uh-huh.
necessarily have to be a lengthy conversation, but people who understand the day-to-day of building a business enough to know what it feels like, not just logically what it is like, but the emotional cycles it goes through. When I've learned that, to create that daily experience and create that habit of getting out of trying to think about all the answers on my own, but just having a sounding board to run that off of, I'm going to make better decisions because my emotions don't take over like they used to. Because now,
Yes.
once I get that feeling of connectedness and just that reminder, that experiential reminder that I'm not in this by myself, then I can actually go back to my work and say, oh, you know what, this thing I was just kind of really freaking out about and making a big deal about, actually, there's a really simple solution to this. I can just deal with this and move on with life. But
Yes.
I'll say that is something I did not fully appreciate, the first time I tried to start a business, and it's a much bigger deal than people realize it is.
Yes. Thank you for sharing. Andrea, what are
Yes.
some of your healthy habits that you would like to share?
Well, I agree very much with both of the things that have been said before. I'm very much like Jade as well. I could get up and go straight to my desk and not eat or drink all day long. And then suddenly it would be 11 p.m. and I would fall asleep. I could actually do that. And there have
Oh,
been
wow.
times where I pretty much have. However, that's not good for me long term, nor is it good for anyone in my family.
Yes.
So I've had to learn to pull back, and my mind is active all the time. So I've had to learn to give myself times where I can allow my mind to go crazy and make note of what it's doing so that I can refer back to it later.
Mm.
And that I stop and I slow down. And unfortunately, especially in the early days, I did not have mastery over myself. And if I had not been working in a group of people, and if I didn't have a coach who didn't care about how I responded to what they told me to do, I would probably not have lasted. It's the fact that there were people saying, okay, you have to stop now. It doesn't matter where you are, but you have to stop and go and make dinner, or you have to stop and go out for a walk, or you need to stop and drink water, or it doesn't matter how intense or difficult this problem is. This has to be delivered now. You can't make it absolutely perfect. Stop. So my big thing was learning how to stop in certain areas. And again, there's the mind, but the really important thing that Dave said is that I would have driven myself mad if I'd been on my own. It took a group. I've heard them say it takes a village to raise a child. This isn't quite the same, but it's kind of the same. It takes more than one person to build a business. That's just the way it is.
Yes, thank you so much. So, thank you for answering those questions and sharing your own journey. I'm sure a lot of the people out there can relate. So, we are going to have an event on October 8 and 9, and this is called Transition to Entrepreneurship. So, this was born obviously because as I was meditating, there was this intuitive guidance that 75 to 85% of the world is really questioning right now where they are. those people from corporate are like, well, I used to go to the office and do all these things, and now I actually have a choice. But then they don't know where to go, right? And they don't know how to start even. Like all of us in the beginning, all the moving parts, it's kind of like we're spinning 8 to 10 plates at a time. So we're here to help you create that path, because it takes an internal conviction and a decision to actually do something that you're going to continue doing, like you've heard them say, right? So we have a coupon code for before the event, and this expires on October 1st. So our coupon code is Early Bird Seat. So you're going to meet all of these people in our team, and we're going to provide you with a guidance system, not just the practical side, right? But also the energetics of it. Because when you start thinking about a decision, but then you have other things, right? You have a but in your sentence. I'd like to start a business, but, right? That cancels out the first sentence you just said. So go ahead, team, and invite them. What can they get out of this event, really? Why would they need to come to this event if they're thinking about it, or maybe they're already in business, but things are not working for them, right? Like they've been there for years and they're like, I'm not making any money. I can't find my clients. Like, what do we do?
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Is I think the good thing about this event is no matter where you are, if you're still working full time and you're considering making a transition, if you have gone down to working part time and you're working, on the side, right? Or you've quit your job and said, I'm all in. Burn all the boats. This is it. This is my only choice, right? I think our event will speak to each one of those, and you'll get put into a program about where you are, right? So if you're just thinking about it, then you'll have a little more visioning, right? If you've been in this situation and you're just not making the money that you wanted to, and you're wondering, should I just go back and get a job, right? Then you'll be put into a program that's going to meet you where you are, where we're going to look at what have you done in the past? What support do you actually need now? So that's the biggest thing I can say is no matter where you are in this journey, our job is to look at where you are in this moment. What next step do you need? And see, we have programs for everyone, right? It's not everyone's going to go and you're going to be with people who are just thinking about it. No, you're going to be with other people who are going through what you're going through. And, Andrea talked about that village, right? So a lot of people will say, but where did you get all those people? How do you know? Do you know what you want, right? This is it. This is where you start, because then it's maybe Dave has, someone that you need because of X, Y, and Z, right? And Andrea has someone you need over here. Something this small as, an event like Dave mentioned too, to not be isolated and surround yourself with other entrepreneurs. The last thing I'll say is we often listen to people, right, who are in that negative space. And what I would say is, have any of them started their own business? Right. A lot of times I hear, oh, my family said this, my friend said this, my old boss, even like someone that was a mentor, right, that I really respect. That's great. And they're probably really good at what they do. But if you haven't started your own business yourself, if you haven't gone through that on your own, you don't know, you have no idea to even imagine that. So that's what, I think the biggest thing is, if you're even thinking about it, if you're curious, you've stumbled across this for a reason, click the link, sign up. You're going to get more information on just this than you could even imagine.
Okay. Dave or Andrea, last words?
I mean, really, I think it just comes down to, if you're not really sure what to do, the best thing you do is take the first step, and it may not be a perfect step, but if you get yourself plugged in with a structure, you'll find out something you didn't already know. And, you're not going to necessarily figure it all out in one fell swoop, but this is really the kind of environment where you can at least start finding support, finding perspectives, and really getting the help of people that have been further down the path than you are. And that's really the best thing you can really do if you're trying to figure out how to get started.
Good. Thank you. Andrea.
Inspiration, I think, from talking to people who've been there and done it, ideas that you can follow, support, absolutely can't do it without. Those are absolutely critical. And I would not have survived at all if I hadn't had those in my life, if I hadn't had people who inspired and supported me, sometimes pushed me, sometimes pulled me, sometimes gave me a shoulder to cry on, encouraged me. We can't do this on our own, especially if we're working from home in an isolated environment where, you know, we're going out much less generally than we used to. You can really go to that horrible dark place in your mind that Dave
Right.
was warning you against.
Yes.
You know, because things don't always go out right. And sometimes you get stuck, and sometimes you need somebody who can help you get through it.
Yes. And I was just guided to share this with you that for those of you who sign up, the first 20 people who sign up for this event, we're going to give you the Clarify Your Money Magnet Position. This is like an e-course that I've created so you can actually start working on your numbers, working on your ideal client. Like, what would that look like? Because if you have